Hi, I'm James from Bellrock. I help leaders understand the intersection of where risk meets people. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer Leslie, who's a very experienced non-executive director based in the Hunter region. And Jen, I reckon I'm going to forget, so could you actually introduce the boards that you're on? Because I've got Regional Australia Bank, that's one.
That's right. Home in Place.
Yep, Home in Place.
A big community housing provider, and COACT.
COACT. Okay, excellent. Well, welcome, Jen, and thank you so much for joining me and giving me access to your time. Look, I reckon let's just get straight into the icebreaker, because I like to keep it all flowing. So I guess the first one is if you're at a barbecue and you're with people that don't really understand the space you work in or the sectors you work in, and someone says, "What do you do, Jen?" How would you sort of describe that explain it to me like I'm five type sense? You know?
I mean, the short answer is I generally say I'm an accountant because
Yep.
that's my professional background and most people
Yep.
understand that. I guess the longer answer is as you've said, I'm a non-executive company director, which means I'm actually not working in any businesses anymore. I'm sitting on the boards
Yep.
of businesses and providing oversight of management and oversight of the strategy of the
Yep.
organisation. So it's very much a hands-off role
Yep.
these days.
Yep. What do they say? Noses in, hands
Hands
out.
out,
That's
yes.
right. Excellent.
Very true.
Excellent. And I guess do you find, just as a aside to that, do you find that often people don't really understand what that means? Like, and I'm certainly not being dismissive of other members of the community, but I think what I've liked about this series is the fact that it's an opportunity to help educate the broader public about the role of non-executive directors in terms of these charities and what we do to actually make sure that they run. But do you find that when you explain that sort of portfolio board career to people, do they sometimes sort of look at you a bit like, I don't know what that is? Or
Look, quite often, I think
Yeah.
if you don't know and it's not the world that you operate in, it is sometimes difficult to
Yeah.
understand. In fact, at one of our organisations, they had their staff conference. They actually got all the board members to sit up on stage
Yeah.
and we introduced ourselves as people
Yep.
and also talked a bit about the role that the board played, because we didn't even think our staff knew what we did. They think we
Yeah,
show up
yeah.
at the office every couple of months, have a bit of a lunch and a chat around the board table and don't really understand the role
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that plays.
Yeah.
So I generally say being a board director is more than just showing up at board meetings. In fact, that's the easy part of the job. The challenging part is everything that goes on behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
you're constantly reading papers
Yeah.
that come to you
Yep.
to understand what's going on and what decisions the management team need.
Yeah.
You're constantly engaging with stakeholders.
Yeah.
They might be the management team, they might be funders, they might be the customers or the clients of the organisation, they could
Yep.
be government representatives. So there's a whole lot of
Yep.
work behind that. And I think to be a good director, you have to be on top of your game. So you also need to be constantly in touch with what is the latest governance thinking,
Yeah.
what is the extra reading I should be doing, what are the conferences I should be going to, who should I be
Yeah.
speaking to
Yeah.
really understand what contemporary thinking is that you can bring to the boards that you sit on.
Yeah, no, I really like that, and I think I want to touch on that bit as well, just for a second. Where aside from your obvious sort of AICD, Governance Institute type stuff, do you find that there's emerging sources of information? Because obviously there's a framework, which the name escapes me now, to do with AI security that I came across a couple of days ago, and I'm like, that is something every non-exec director needs to be across now, because it's sort of the next evolution of where AI is going. Do you have any sort of hot tips on where you go to look for, the next thing over the horizon? Or
Look, James, I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
So I'm a member of GIA,
Yeah.
AICD, the Chartered Accountants
Yep.
Institute, so all of those
Yep.
feed into it. You're constantly listening to general news.
Yep.
A lot of the big consulting firms will
Yep.
have lunches, seminars,
Yep.
webinars, so I tap into any of those sorts of things that help me to
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
what those emerging issues are. And then there's industry specific things.
Yeah.
So I mentioned community housing's one of the
Yep.
boards.
Yep.
I'm going to a conference on that in a few months because I want to understand a bit more deeply about the sector. In banking, there's different things that we might read because it's a different sector and I need to be across those specific issues. So there's the governance piece, but it's also deeply understanding the sectors that you work in.
Yeah, nice. I was going to say, in tongue in cheek, it wouldn't be a luncheon at KPMG at the moment. Certainly not this week.
Absolutely not. But I am getting invitations for some of the other ones.
Yeah, there you
I'm
go.
not sure what's going on.
Right, nice. Well, I guess moving on to the next one, because this is the one that really fascinates me the most in terms of everyone's got their own unique perspective. So what is it that keeps you, I guess, what gets you out of bed in the morning to come and support the charity space? Because I think we both know that it, as we were just talking about off camera before here, huge amount of risk, so many challenges, constant, I guess, threats and potential issues. What keeps you coming back, aside from being a glutton for punishment? I don't know.
Well, as we've referred to, I had a long career in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
And I retired from that about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was very specific about what I wanted to do when I left that sector.
Yeah.
And I did really want to spend my time in the for-purpose sector. I wanted this last season of my career to be very focused on using the skills and experience that I've got to, I guess if I'm a bit cheesy to say, creating some social good in the world. How could I apply those skills in organisations that sat with my personal and professional values, but use those skills I've got in the corporate world to assist those organisations to deliver their mission.
Yeah, I agree. And God, that was a bit grim, the last season of your career. I was like, I'm sure you got plenty of life left in you.
Hope so.
Yeah. But no, I don't think that's cheesy at all. I think that's aligned with everyone I've spoken to, and myself included. Like there's so much of that, whether you call it paying it forward, whether you want to feel like you're contributing something that's got lasting, meaningful impact. I think they're all generally the same reasons why all of us want to support that sector, and hence this series highlighting the important role that directors like yourself and others play in making sure that these organisations can deliver on their mission and purpose for the community or the cohort that they serve. And so I think that's fascinating to hear. And what drew you to accounting? Was it just a chance career choice that next thing you know it's 30 years later, or were you always a maths and numbers sort of person? Or
James, I don't believe anyone sits at school and says, gee, I want to be an accountant. I literally don't think anyone does that.
I don't know, it might be.
And yet many of my friends are accountants.
Yeah.
I think it's a very practical career, and I finished school in the early 80s when we were in a bit of a recession.
Yep.
And so really it was just practical. And I was okay with maths. I was pretty good with the economic side of things. So it was just kind of a natural fit to where I thought my skills, and there were jobs for them. So it was a practical decision. I did toy once with nursing, and I've realised I would have been the world's worst nurse, so I'm very pleased. Actually, I think the patients are very pleased I never went down that line, but it was actually a good fit, and I think it's a very good basis for all of those business management, corporate type skills that you can then now apply in other areas. And many people who start in accounting don't end up there. They're now CEOs of businesses, or they are working in the not-for-profit sector, or they're doing other interesting creative jobs as well. So it's a really good foundational career.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a bit underappreciated at times, because you could argue it's far more transportable across sectors than say something like law, because it's, as you said, gives you a great commercial acumen and an ability to understand the underpinnings of a business.
Absolutely, and I was speaking to a colleague I met once who was working in a creative industry but had done an economics degree, and she said, I got the job because I knew the numbers. She said, I love the industry and it's a very creative industry, but I'm successful at what I do because I know the numbers and I can make sure things can pay its way.
Oh, that's awesome to hear, Jen. And I guess next question on the list is really what do you see as the big ticket issues, or what's making you lose sleep at night in terms of governance and risk issues for the charities sector? I guess also love to hear about the banking side as well, but just specifically the charities sector to start.
Sure. Look, most not-for-profit organisations, and actually I hate the term not-for-profit
Oh, I
because
know,
we do
I
make
know.
profit, but let's call them
Yeah.
for-purpose
For-purpose is a much nicer.
organisations. Yes, are often reliant on government funding, whether it's delivering government contracts
Yep.
or receiving grants to fulfil their mission. And changing policy at government level is
Yep.
a big risk for
Yep.
those sorts of organisations because new ministers come into their roles, they look at it with fresh eyes, they want to do something different, and then you think, well, hey, we might need to completely reorganise our business model
Yep.
because what we deliver, employment services is a good example on one
Yep.
of my boards. There's a whole lot of reform was announced only
Right.
a few weeks ago, so we're now thinking about what does that mean
Yep.
for our business model. So whilst that's challenging, I guess the flip side of that is we've also had to apply our mind is, well, to what else can we do in our organisation to continue to create good in society? And so some of we're on this diversification strategy,
Yep.
which causes me to lose sleep both on the risk side but also on the excitement side
Yeah,
because
yeah.
both of them. So we're looking at setting up a special assistance school to help kids that are disengaged from
Yep.
mainstream schooling.
Wow.
We're also looking at going into an allied health business to support people who might be living with disability.
Yeah.
So you've got to be very across what our government's thinking, and you have a change of government and things can change quite quickly. We've had a bit of stability
Yep.
for a while now, but that certainly does make you as a board have to be thinking ahead
Yep.
and thinking quite strategically
Yep.
on how you keep your organisation relevant.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I guess for you guys in those sectors, do you feel like you've got good government advocacy in your corner? Because I know certainly myself working in that out-of-home care sector, the organisation that supports us to advocate to government has been really influential in making sure that we've got that voice to policymakers to proactively try and encourage the change of policy rather than just have it kind of thrown at you.
Yeah. And I think it's part of the role. We're not, we are policy takers, but we also want to be policy influencers.
Absolutely.
And-
Oh, influences.
Conjures up
Yeah,
all sorts
it
of
does,
things.
yeah.
But yes, so one of my organisations, we actually engage a government relations representative
Wow,
who
yeah.
keeps us in touch with what's happening in Canberra because a lot of our funding is federal.
Right.
Meetings with ministers, coming up with solutions that we can give ministers that might make them look good, for
Right,
example.
nice.
So that's helpful. And then we have also focused in a different organisation very much on our advocacy policy and
Yep.
who we should be talking to constantly.
Yep.
It does make a difference if you can get in the ear of the decision makers.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't agree more. And I think that the unfortunate risk is if that doesn't happen, then you do get the reactive policy thrown at you or the unanticipated changes that then can potentially set off major, scares for organisations.
Yes, you've always got to be, I think, several years ahead
Yeah.
of where the policy's going to land.
Yep. Yeah. And on that sort of the emerging risk space, I think all of us are all trying to work out at that board level how are we properly going to govern AI usage? I guess what's your perspective on that, and what are you seeing in that space at the moment?
Look, it is a bit scary, to be honest. I was writing some notes yesterday and Copilot literally just rewrote a paragraph for me, practically without me asking. So it's like, it's on top of us before we know. I think it is a bit scary because it is so new, but it's also exciting.
Yes.
Because it can create, and we talk often in the for-purpose sector about our skinny margins and how it's challenging to continue to deliver the services, particularly if you're in a fixed price grant or a fixed price contract. So creating efficiencies within the organisation and using AI to do that is starting to become a focus. And we actually just approved on one of my boards some funding to advance that AI strategy, more around efficiency measures. We're not trying to be too clever to start with. We're just trying to let's get the foundation parts right. Let's see if we can use it to make it easier for our staff and importantly easier for our clients by using AI.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's like I think the benefits are huge, but it's just about at that board level being able to understand and not try and have silly ideas about trying to repress its usage, but it almost feels to me a bit like we've got to clearly call out at a board level the way we want to shape the way our organisations use AI, because otherwise then it's almost like the horse is out of the stable and it's off down the street. You're not going to stop it.
Yeah, I think the door's opened already.
Exactly,
I think the horse has got its foot out the door,
Yeah.
to be honest. But I think talking about it, and something else that's important too, I think, is having the skills on the board who perhaps understand the AI, tech, cyberspace more
Yes.
than the average. We've talked about me being an accountant. That's obviously not my professional background. So we've been quite conscious in recruitment recently to ensure that directors we put on the board have that deeper skill set that can help guide the organisation.
Yeah. I think that's really important, because I think otherwise something I see with some of our clients is an over-reliance then on external service providers in that cyberspace, and it can create almost a bit of an apathy in a way, which I think is, apathy is always dangerous at a board level. But that's amazing. And I think with the other area that I think I've talked about with people in a lot of these conversations is the challenge around governance in relation to work health and safety, and this huge piece around psychological safety, respect at work, all that sort of stuff. How do you find that challenging? Do you feel like you guys are sort of managing it, or what do you see as the big challenges for all of us in that space? Because I feel like it's just a massive headache trying to work it all out.
It is, and it's evolving. It's like painting the harbour bridge, isn't it? You can start and you know where you're going, and then the legislation changes or something new, and you mentioned psychosocial risk, which we didn't talk about 10 years ago.
No.
I'm not saying it wasn't there, but we didn't talk about it, and now it's very much, in fact, it's one of the preeminent workers' comp claim areas. So yes, it is very much front of mind of the board, and you asked what keeps me awake at night. That would be the one thing, particularly when your organisation works in an area that is inherently risky.
Yes.
If you're working with cohorts of clients who, by their nature, are more challenging, then there is a bigger risk for your staff. So we have to be very mindful of that. It's really being constantly thinking about it and elevating WHS, particularly to board level, not just perhaps audit and risk level. Like it should go through there, but it's very important. On one board I used to sit on, WHS went straight to the board. Straight to the board, because they were so concerned, and it was such a big issue for them. And I think that's the elevation that it needs to have. And getting some outside support, we've found that quite helpful, at least to set up the frameworks and the reporting so that we know we're getting the right information for us to fulfil our obligations, and then to know that the frameworks are in place for management to ensure that our staff are being looked at as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and I like the analogy about the painting the harbour bridge. And for some reason, it made me think about Paul Hogan as well, because of like he was. Like by the time you painted it got to the end and painted, you got to come back and
start again.
Absolutely. And look, and so I guess the last question, and on a little bit more sort of deeper philosophical note, Jen, I guess if you were writing a note to your younger self, what would be some of the things you'd put in that note that you wish you knew then that you know now? I don't know. I know it's a bit of an odd one, but I've said to a few people, the main reason I like to ask it is because I constantly have asked myself that same question, because I've had a few career changes over the course of 20 years, and I sort of wonder what would have I encouraged myself to do younger? But I guess what's your perspective on that, Jen?
I think probably one of the key things was I started my working life in the 80s, and it was all about, female empowerment and women getting into higher jobs, and, working girl movies and 9 to 5 and all that kind of thing. And I think we were led to believe that we could just have it all, and that it wasn't actually going to be difficult.
Right.
So I wish someone had said to me at the time, this is what I'd tell myself, is that you probably can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Right.
And I think I wished I'd paced myself a little bit better and been more forgiving when it was quite challenging, when you're trying to keep all those plates spinning at once. Be okay to let a couple go and just concentrate on that. So I think that's probably a big learning.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I wished and I think this comes back to confidence, you know, when you're younger, you
Yep.
don't have, it's easy to look back in hindsight, but I wished I had a bit more courage or been a bit braver to perhaps try some things out of the box more than I did.
Yeah.
Or even to just call out things that perhaps I saw in the workplace that weren't right, things that you wouldn't get away
Yeah.
with
Yep.
today, you know, thinking sort of misogynistic
Yeah,
practices,
yeah.
racism, those
Yeah.
sorts of things. I'm not saying that I approved of them, but I think I wished I'd been braver
Yeah.
at calling those sorts of things out
Yeah.
sooner rather
Yeah.
than later.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. And I mean, having worked a lot of my career in underground coal mining, it's not as bad now, but it had just the worst locker room boys culture. So I know,
yes.
and it's the old, you know, what you walk past is what you accept sort of thing. And I know exactly where you come from. That I could think of some instances like that where I'm like, oh, that was not cool, and I should have said something, and I
Yes.
wish I had.
Absolutely. You know, there's things they say, don't go into that room
Yeah.
because the things they've got hanging on the wall probably aren't fit. But that was on
Yeah.
me, and I just thought, hang on.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
why should
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
adjust my behaviour? But
Exactly.
so I wished I'd
Yes.
been braver on those sorts of things. I
Okay.
certainly wouldn't hold back now.
Yeah, okay. And well, I think for the most part, I don't know if you agree, do you think, you know, even though sometimes, you know, you could say potentially the pendulum's been swung too far, I think I look at the younger generation with a lot of positivity now in terms of the workforce, they don't cop that
No.
anymore. And I think that's a good thing. And I think, you know, certainly the organisation I work for, it would not tolerate even a sniff of misogynist sort of, you know, even inference. And I think it's good that the world is like that now, because I look back at, like I said, mining or at other industries I work in, and I sort of go, ooh, when I think about some of the things that they said, and it was accepted. Like, it was like, oh, well, you know, that's just part of dealing with that cohort of people, and you're like, no.
No, and I
Yeah.
don't think it's swung too far. It probably
Yeah.
hasn't swung far enough
Okay,
yet,
yeah.
because I still think there are pockets of
Yeah.
those sorts of behaviours in workplaces. So I think we need to keep on it, and I think the worst thing we can do is become complacent
Yeah.
and think we've solved it all, because I don't think we're quite there yet,
Yep.
but we just need to keep working on it. And like you, I'm enthused by the,
Yeah.
I don't know whether they're the Gen Zs that are coming
I don't know
into
what
the
they are.
workforce
Yeah,
now, but
yeah.
they don't put up with any crap, and I think that's
Yeah.
a good thing.
Well, and I think probably that's sort of links to maybe what we've been talking about. But I know an example I heard, witnessed not that long ago, and I guess it potentially only exists where you've got a CEO and a culture that supports this. But there was a senior manager said sort of a slightly off-colour comment in front of a group of younger people, and this was in a technology firm that I was doing some work with. And virtually the most junior lady in the room totally called him out publicly on it.
Oh, wow.
And he kind of copped it quite well, but I think I found out afterwards that's because the culture of that organisation is about, it wouldn't matter whether it's the CEO or the janitor, they all kind of call out that behaviour, and they have like a speak up culture. And so I think that seems to be I think it's a good thing when you have that, and particularly where you've got a CEO that wants to have that sort of 360-degree feedback and isn't afraid to sort of be held to a standard. Because I think certainly a lot of the workplaces I worked at when I was younger, and maybe yourself, it was always like, almost like don't disagree with the boss, and every idea the CEO has is an amazing idea, no matter if it's rubbish and all that sort of thing.
I'm just thrilled
Yeah.
that that person felt it was a safe space to be able to,
be able to
call
do
that
that,
out.
yeah.
To me, that speaks very highly of culture.
Yeah, I agree totally, and I think that's why it lingered in my memory, because it's like not every workplace would you could do that without potentially having sort of committing career suicide or something like that.
Yes.
So yeah, okay, and any other sort of bits you'd put in that, bits of advice you'd put in there for yourself, Jen?
Oh, look, there's probably an enormous list of advice. Wouldn't you love to
Yeah,
go back
yep.
and know what you know now and
Yep.
start off your career? And probably the final, which is probably quite a personal thing, I just
Yeah.
wish I'd been kinder to myself.
To yourself.
Which sort of is linked to the other things as well, when I was just really burning it at both ends and
Yep.
working hard and trying to do everything and please everybody.
Yep.
Rather than just saying, hang on, it's okay, take a step back.
Yep.
So I just wished I had been a little bit kinder to myself back then and given
okay.
myself a bit of latitude.
Yeah. No, I think that That makes sense. And interestingly, you're not the first person that's said that. No, I'm curious about why that comes up a lot, but I think it's amazing that you've got that insight to be able to, think, it's that potentially you should have given yourself some more latitude and just be a bit kinder on yourself.
I think there's, when you're a driven kind of person and you want to achieve and, you work hard. And I mean, I love hard work.
Yep.
Like as I'm sure you do, it's,
Yep.
That's what keeps us going.
Yes,
We like the challenge.
of
and
course.
So you get so caught up in that, but sometimes that is at a cost.
Yes.
And I think it's recognising what that cost is and just giving into that a little bit and trying to get that balance a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jen, and I really appreciate the conversation. It's been fantastic. And as always, just wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of, put a plug in for your organisations if anyone wants to know more. So Regional Bank of
Australia Bank,
yeah.
Which is a large regional bank about to undergo a big merger on the 1st of July with Summerland Bank. So that's very exciting for us. COACT, which is based in Brisbane but operates across the country, which delivers large employment services contracts and is excitingly diversifying into allied health and schools. And Home in Place, which many of our Hunter audience will know, who deliver community housing again. Across the country now and into New Zealand.
Wow.
And also a very small plug, I'm also on the management committee for Hunter Homeless Connect, which is a tiny little charity, very small budget. And I work with some amazingly passionate people. We deliver one large event a year and it brings me so much joy.
Amazing. And that's Michelle's on
Michelle
that?
Faithful is our indomitable chair. And keeps us all on track.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Jen, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks.